Okay, so through the first three videos, we have a chorale that's starting to take form. Let me go ahead and let's listen through to this one more time. Sounds pretty nice. Sounds like a really standard chord progression, which is exactly what it is. But to people who have studied music theory, they would find a few things wrong with this. So we're going to take care of fixing some of these mistakes. I'm not going to worry about explanations so much right now, but promise me, do as I show you, and I promise that we're going to fix these mistakes, and we'll talk more about this in the future. But for right now, what's most important is for us to actually do it. Couple things that we have to do to go ahead and get this to be as good as it's going to be is we're going to take these chords and we're actually going to do what we call re-voice them. And these chords we have, they are full chords, nice full chords, but we're going to move around how they're put together so that way we have a little more room to work with. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this low C in the bottom of this C major chord in the treble clef. I'm going to hit the delete key. And we're left with C in the bass and then E and G up top. Now I don't want to just get rid of that C. Instead, I'm going to replace it up here. So now we have a C, an E, a G, and a high C. And the other thing I'm going to do with this first chord is I'm going to take this G, and I'm also going to delete that. But I'm going to move the G to the top space of the bass clef. And so now we can see that things kind of look more balanced. Rather than one note at a time in the bass clef, we're going to have two in bass and two in treble. That's a really, really standard way of writing music. And this is going to be a nice sound. This first chord, that's what we call spread voicing because the notes are all spread from each other a little bit. They're not as close and tight as possible. So I'm just going to click on this and let's just listen to that first chord. So it has all the same notes in the initial C major chord we had, but we've moved them around. It's going to have a slightly different sound, even though the same notes are in there. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to revoice our F major chord. Very similarly to how we took that G, which is the middle note right here, out of the C major chord and put it in the bass. We're going to take the middle note here, that A, press delete, and we're going to replace that down here with that A. So once again, we have two notes in the bass clef, two in treble, two in the bass clef, two in treble. And again, we have spread voicing. This spread voicing is going to help us avoid some issues. So far, the two chords we have are these. Nice, nice sound that we have. Now, in the last video, I mentioned that we want to have the bass voice go in the opposite direction from the other voices. However, I broke that rule immediately, and we had an F step up to a G in the bass, just like we have an F step up to the G in the treble clef. Now, this is a problem. This is what we call parallel octaves, because from F to F, that is an octave, and from G to G, that's an octave, and these are both moving upward at the same time. They move in parallel motion, but we want contrary motion. The easiest way to avoid parallel octaves is to not make them octaves. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this G here, and instead of delete it and take it down to the bass clef, I'm actually just going to press the down arrow and make that an F. So now, if I pull up the keyboard, which you should be able to now see this keyboard. Let me just show you. I know that these are the notes we actually have. Let me show you on the keyboard the notes we have. We have G, B, D, and F. So I've done a little skipping around, but we have a G, 2, 3 is B, 4, 5 is D, and 6 and 7 is F. We're going to use a G7 chord. This is a 7th chord, like we have just talked about. And that's going to give us a nice full rich sound, and you'll learn that G7, its job is it's going to really want to go to the C major chord that we have here. And so what we have, instead of having two G's in this chord, we've changed one to an F, we have a G7 chord. Now there's one other problem with what we have here, and that is, so we've taken care of parallel octaves because from F to F is an octave, but G to F, that's not an octave. That's not a problem. We fixed that. The other problem we have is what we call parallel fifths. We have an F down here at the bottom, and we have a C here up top. That is a fifth. Okay. Also right here, this F to that C is a fifth. So even though this is much more spread out, F to C, that's a fifth. And here we have a G in the bottom and a D up top. That's also a fifth. So similarly, we don't want octaves going in the same direction as each other. We also don't want fifths going in the same direction as each other. So we have to take care of getting rid of these parallel fifths. Like I said with the parallel octave, the easiest thing to do to get rid of parallel fifths is to take away the fifth. We're actually going to go ahead, we're going to delete that D. So now we're just left with two notes in the treble clef, and as you can see, F to C is a fifth, but G to B, that's a third. We don't have parallel fifths anymore. We don't have parallel octaves and we don't have parallel fifths. Now we need this we need this voice here, this upper voice in the bass clef, to have something to do. But what we can't do is have it go to a D, like the D that we took away here, because either it's going to be a high from this A to that D, that's a bit of a jump, but also if we, I'm sorry, let me just delete these extra notes here, adding them back. If we take it from this A to that D, that's also a pretty big jump. That's usually the job for the bass. So instead of that, we're going to keep everything nice and close. We're just going to leave D out of this chord entirely and put another G in the bass. So now we have a G down at the bottom and at the top of the bass clef staff. We have an F and we have a B. So even though we took out that D, we still have the G, the B, and the F from the G7 chord. This is still going to sound like a G7 chord to us. The D is actually the least important note in that chord. And the very last thing that we're going to do is we're going to revoice this last chord, the C major chord. Similarly to what we've done before, we're going to take out that G in the middle of the treble clef and put it down here. And now what we have is a perfectly voiced C, F, G, C progression, and it's going to sound like this. Now that's a chorale that is going to follow the rules of music theory. Even though we haven't spent much time talking about those rules, you have just written music that even Mozart and Bach would approve of. The last thing we have to do with this is we have to label what these chords actually are. So let's go to text, and I'm going to click the bass clef at the beginning. I'm going to click the lyrics tool, and we're going to use those Roman numerals that I showed you before to label what these chords are. So we're in C major, and the first chord we have is C major. That's what we call the one chord, because it's based off of the first note in the scale. So capital I, Roman numeral 1, takes care of naming that for us. The next chord we have is an F major chord. If we're in C major, here's our starting note. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. F is our fourth step of the scale, and it's our fourth chord. And it's a major chord, so we're going to do a capital I, capital V. This is our 4 chord. Next up, we have G is going to be our fifth step of C major. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we're going to click here, label it a 5. Now remember, we have this F here, which is our 7th note of the chord. Let's just go ahead and add the number 7. So far we have 1, 4, 5, 7, and that's how you would say it. And then we close out with a C major chord, just like we started with the C major chord. So the last thing we have to do is just write the capital letter I there. Let's give it one more listen from the beginning, not from the blank measure. And that is a perfectly written chorale. Once you have done all this, please take a screenshot, send it to me. I hope that this class went a little faster than some of the other video-heavy ones that I've done. I know this is a long video itself, but I hope that this has been enjoyable for you and that you're proud of writing this beautiful music. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Reach out to me if you need help. Bye.